It was a cold November evening in 2019. I had just turned 19, living with my parents in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Illinois. That night, they were attending a family friend's wedding about an hour away. I didn't go. I had an exam the next morning and wanted to study in peace. The house felt unusually still after they left. The kind of silence that seems to expand the longer you sit in it. It was around 9:30 p.m. when I made myself a cup of coffee and sat by the kitchen table, which faced the driveway. From that window, I could see part of the front yard, illuminated by the weak yellow light above the garage. Everything was normal, until I heard what sounded like gravel crunching outside. At first, I thought it was the neighbor's car or maybe a stray cat. But when I looked out the window, there was nothing, just the wind moving the trees. I shook it off, went back to my notes, and put on some quiet background music. A few minutes later, the sound came again, slower this time, like footsteps pressing into gravel. Crunch, pause, crunch. My heart started racing a bit. I turned off the music and listened. The sound stopped. I waited. Nothing. To calm myself, I turned on more lights around the house. My parents always told me that a well-lit home deters trespassers. But honestly, all it did was highlight how empty the house felt. Around 10:15, I went to the kitchen again to refill my coffee. That's when I froze. From the corner of my eye, I saw something move outside, near the edge of the driveway. I slowly turned my head and saw a figure standing halfway behind the big oak tree, tall, still, just watching the house. I stood there for a solid 10 seconds, unable to move. My brain couldn't process it. I kept telling myself it was a trick of the shadows. But then the figure shifted slightly, like it was leaning forward to look closer. I yanked the curtains shut and stepped back. My first instinct was to call my dad, but I didn't want to freak him out. So I called my neighbor, Mark, who lived across the street. He didn't pick up. I checked all the doors. Locked, windows still, secure. Then I turned off the kitchen light and peeked through a gap in the curtain. The figure was gone. I stayed frozen for what felt like an hour, just staring at the tree. Nothing. The driveway was empty. At around 11 p.m., I decided to go upstairs and try to sleep. I left a few lights on downstairs, just in case. But around midnight, I woke up to a soft tapping sound. It was coming from downstairs. 3 slow taps. Pause. Then another 3. I sat up, heart pounding, and listened. It was definitely at the kitchen window. I quietly grabbed my phone and opened the camera app. Maybe if I could record proof, someone would believe me. I tiptoed to the top of the stairs and leaned just enough to see the reflection from the kitchen lights. There was a hand pressed against the glass, pale fingers unmoving. Then it slowly slid down the window, leaving a faint smear behind. I backed up into my room and dialed 911. My voice was shaking as I whispered to the operator what was happening. She told me to lock myself in the room and stay quiet. While I was on the call, I heard the faint sound of the side door rattling. Someone was testing it. The operator kept me calm, told me officers were on their way. A few minutes later, I heard the sound of distant sirens. The rattling stopped. I heard fast footsteps outside. Then silence. When the police arrived, they checked the property. No one was there, but they found muddy footprints near the kitchen window and the side door. The prints led to the street and then disappeared. Here's the part that still chills me. When the officer checked the door handle, he said, "You're lucky you locked this. It's slightly bent, like someone tried to force it open." They never caught whoever it was. For weeks afterward, I couldn't be alone in that house. Every creak made me jump. Every car that slowed outside made my stomach twist. To this day, I still think about that night and what might have happened if I hadn't double-checked the locks. This happened to me in the winter of 2017. I was 22 and living alone for the first time. A small one-story rental house just outside of Portland. It wasn't fancy, but it was quiet and affordable. The kind of place where you could hear the rain on the roof and nothing else. Or at least, that's how it was for the first few months. The weirdness started one night in late February. I had just finished dinner and was cleaning up when I heard a faint sound coming from the basement. It wasn't loud, just a muffled thud, followed by something that almost sounded like a whisper. At first, I thought maybe the pipes were acting up. The house was old, and the landlord had warned me that the basement had some settling noises. But this sounded different. Rhythmic. Intentional. I grabbed my flashlight and opened the basement door. Cold air brushed up my face. The light switch at the top of the stairs didn't work, so I shined the flashlight downward. The beam caught the old concrete steps and boxes, covered in dust. "Hello?" I called out. Nothing. Just the faint echo of my own voice. I went down halfway, shining the light around. Nothing moved, so I turned back, feeling slightly foolish. But just as I reached the top, I heard a voice. Wait, it was faint, muffled, like someone speaking through fabric. I froze. The word was clear, though quiet enough that I thought maybe I imagined it. I stood perfectly still for 10 seconds, listening. Nothing. I shut the door, locked it, and tried to shake it off. Maybe the neighbors next door were watching TV. Maybe the sound came through the vents. But later that night, while lying in bed, I heard it again. That same faint whispering. It wasn't coming from outside this time. It was directly below me. From the basement, I got up and turned on the hallway light. The sound stopped. I went to the basement door and pressed my ear against it. Silence. I didn't go down there again that night. The next day, I called my landlord to ask if anyone had ever reported weird noises. She just laughed it off and said, "Oh, that basement's ancient. Probably the furnace or something." I wanted to believe that, I really did. But a few nights later, around 2 a.m., I woke up to what sounded like footsteps coming from directly below my room. Slow, deliberate steps on the concrete floor. I sat up, every muscle tense. The sound stopped. Then came that voice again. Clearer this time, low and distorted. "You shouldn't be here." I turned on every light in the house and grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the door. I called a friend to come over. I didn't care how crazy I sounded. When he arrived about 20 minutes later, we went into the basement together. The moment we opened the door, a gust of air came up the stairs. Cold, damp, and foul-smelling, like wet metal. We searched the whole place. Behind boxes, under the stairs, even inside the old furnace room. Nothing. But when we turned to go back up, my friend stopped me and said, "Dude, look at that." On the far wall, in the dust, were handprints. Small, faint ones. Not like adult hands, more like a child's. There were 5 of them, smeared across the concrete wall about 3 feet off the ground. We got out of there fast. I slept on my friend's couch that night. The next morning, I went back with daylight streaming in through the small basement window. The handprints were still there. I wiped them off with a rag and bleach. They faded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. A few days later, I moved out. I didn't even finish my lease. Here's the part that still gives me chills. About a month later, I was scrolling through local news online when I saw a headline. Remains of missing 9-year-old found near abandoned property in northeast Portland. The address listed was 2 blocks from where I'd been renting. The article mentioned that the boy had gone missing in the early 90s. Last seen playing near his home. I couldn't help but wonder if somehow he never really left that neighborhood. When I was 16, I used to think ghosts were just stories adults told to keep kids from sneaking out late. That changed the year my mom and I moved into our new house. It was a small, quiet home in rural Idaho. Nothing special, just a 2-bedroom place with old wallpaper and creaky floors. The bathroom was small too, and the mirror above the sink had a thin crack running diagonally across one corner. The first time something felt off was one night after dinner. I went to brush my teeth, and when I looked in the mirror, I saw myself. But my reflection didn't move right. When I lifted my toothbrush, the reflection was a second late. When I tilted my head, it didn't follow right away. It was so subtle I thought maybe I was just tired. But over the next few days, it kept happening. A blink too slow, a turn delayed, a flicker in the reflection that didn't match reality. One night, I decided to test it. I stood in front of the mirror for a full minute, staring at myself. I didn't move. I just watched. And then, my reflection smiled. I didn't. It wasn't a wide grin, just a small twitch of the lips. But it was enough to make my heart pound. I backed away and ran straight to my mom's room. She thought I was dreaming. The next morning, I went back to that same mirror in daylight. Nothing was wrong. My reflection looked perfectly normal again. I convinced myself I must have imagined it. But that night, as I washed my face before bed, I noticed something else. There was condensation along the mirror's bottom edge, but not from steam. It looked like fingerprints from the inside.
I wiped them off, but they came back the next night, 5 long streaks dragging upward. I told my mom again, and she just said, "You're overthinking it. It's an old mirror." But when she left for a weekend trip to visit my aunt, I was home alone. That's when things got worse. The second night she was gone, I woke up to the sound of running water. I thought maybe I'd left the bathroom sink on, but when I got there, the tap was dry. Still, the mirror was fogged over completely, and in that fog, someone had written a word. Stay. I wiped it away, heart racing. I turned off the bathroom light and shut the door. But when I went back to bed, I could still hear faint tapping, like fingernails brushing against glass. The next morning, I noticed a new crack had appeared, thin and curved, almost like a smile etched into the mirror. That evening, I FaceTimed my mom and told her I was sleeping in her room until she got back. She said fine, just keep the doors locked. But around 3 a.m., I woke up to the bathroom light flickering from the hallway. The door was slightly ajar, and I could see the reflection inside, but it wasn't reflecting the hallway behind me. It was showing me standing there, even though I was still in bed. And that version of me in the mirror? It smiled again, slowly, deliberately, and then it turned and walked out of frame. I swear on my life, I heard footsteps cross the hallway floor right after that. When my mom came home 2 days later, I made her help me take the mirror down. Behind it was the real horror. Deep scratches etched into the drywall. Some formed words. Let me out. We replaced the mirror with a new one, and the noises stopped. But a few months ago, I went back to visit my mom. She'd moved the old mirror to the attic for storage. Out of curiosity, I lifted the cloth covering it. The crack was wider now, like something inside had finally smiled all the way. This happened last summer during a thunderstorm. I live in a small town outside Kansas City, and the storms there can get intense. Winds that shake the walls, thunder that rattles your chest. That night, I was home alone. My parents were visiting relatives and the power had already flickered twice. I'd lit 2 candles just in case. At around 11:30 p.m., the lights went out completely. Everything, fridge, fan, TV, dead silent. Only the wind howling outside and the occasional boom of thunder. I decided to wait it out, sitting on the couch with my phone light on. But after a few minutes, I heard something strange, a faint scraping sound from the front door, like someone dragging a stick across it, slowly. I froze, thinking maybe a tree branch was brushing the porch. But the sound came again, longer this time. Scrap. Pause. Scrap. Then 3 slow knocks. Not loud, just soft, deliberate. I called out, "Who's there?" No answer. Another knock. I grabbed the flashlight and peeked through the curtain. The porch was empty. The rain came down hard, the street beyond pitch black. My heart was pounding now. I tried calling my parents, but there was no signal. Then the scraping started again, this time on the back door. I spun around so fast I nearly dropped the light. The back door had a small window, and through it I could see movement. Something or someone was standing there, just outside. Their outline visible only when lightning flashed. Every time the sky lit up, the figure stood in the exact same place. Tall, still, almost like it was waiting. Then, during one flash, it wasn't there. The next lightning strike came 5 seconds later, and it was closer. Right up against the glass, I dropped my phone. The screen cracked when it hit the floor, the light going out completely. The room plunged into darkness, and that's when I heard the whisper. It was right behind me, a man's voice, calm, too close to be real. "Don't look outside again." I spun around, but there was nothing. No one there. The whisper came again, this time from the other side of the room. "Keep the lights off." I grabbed the candle from the coffee table, lit it with shaking hands, and bolted to the bedroom. I locked the door and pushed a dresser against it. For the next 10 minutes, I just sat there, listening to the storm. No more whispers, no scraping, just thunder. Then, a sudden loud click. The power came back. The lamp beside me flickered on, the hum of electricity returning. Relief flooded me, until I noticed something. The front door, which I had locked, was standing wide open. The wind blew rain inside, soaking the carpet. And on the floor, just past the doorway, were wet footprints. Bare feet. One pair leading in, none leading out. I followed the trail cautiously, every nerve on fire. The prints led into the hallway, then stopped right in front of the mirror by the kitchen. That's where I saw him. Not behind me, not in the house, but inside the mirror. A man with pale, dripping skin and completely black eyes staring back at me, and then the lights flickered once more, and he was gone. The next morning, when daylight filled the house, I checked every door and window. Nothing was broken, no signs of entry, but the footprints were still there, perfectly clean, no mud, no dirt, just water. I moved out a month later. The landlord told me something strange, said the house had once belonged to a man who was found dead during a thunderstorm, face down in front of his mirror. They said lightning struck the house that night and shattered every bulb inside. Since then, the power sometimes flickers when storms roll through. But never for long. Never long enough for anyone to see what might come through when it goes dark. There's a lake near my hometown in northern Montana that most people don't swim in anymore. It's called Blackwater Lake, deep, cold, and still as glass even on windy days. Locals say it's bottomless. Of course, that's not true, but the stories around it go way back. People disappearing, strange shapes seen under the surface, things brushing swimmers' legs in the dark. I never believed any of it until the summer of 2019. My friends and I rented a small cabin by the lake for a weekend getaway, just the four of us. We brought food, music, and fishing gear. No internet, no neighbors, no distractions. It was supposed to be peaceful. But the first night, just after sunset, we heard something. A splash. Not the kind from a fish. It sounded heavy, like someone throwing a boulder into the water. We shined our flashlights toward the sound. The surface rippled once, then went perfectly still. No one said anything, but the air felt wrong. Quiet in a way nature isn't supposed to be quiet. Later, when everyone went to sleep, I stayed outside a bit longer by the dock. The moonlight reflected perfectly off the water, like a mirror. But as I stood there, I saw something move below the surface. It looked like a shape, long, pale, almost human, drifting just beneath the waterline. At first I thought it was my reflection, distorted by the light, until it opened its eyes. I stumbled back so fast I nearly fell into the lake. But when I looked again, nothing. Just black, rippling water. The next morning, I tried to brush it off. Told myself it was just exhaustion. But one of my friends, Tyler, said he hadn't slept. He kept hearing something tapping against the side of the cabin all night, like knuckles on wood. We checked the walls. There were wet handprints, small ones, too small for any of us. That evening, we went fishing. About half an hour before sunset, Tyler's line went tight. Whatever he hooked was strong. It pulled and thrashed like it wanted to drag the pole into the lake. Then, just as suddenly, it went slack. When he reeled in the line, the hook wasn't empty. There was a small piece of cloth tangled around it, soaked, blackened with age. Looked like part of a dress. We packed up fast and decided to leave first thing in the morning. But that night, none of us slept. Around 3 a.m., the power flickered out. The lake outside was completely dark, but we could hear movement. Slow, sloshing sounds like someone wading through shallow water. Then came the tapping again, this time from the window beside the bed. 3 slow taps. We froze. Tyler grabbed his flashlight and pointed it toward the glass. For half a second, we saw her, a pale woman's face just beyond the window, eyes wide and colorless, water dripping from her hair. Then she was gone. The next morning, when daylight came, there were muddy footprints on the porch. They led from the water's edge, straight to the cabin door. We didn't even pack. We just left. Around 3 a.m., the power flickered out. The lake outside was completely dark, but we could hear movement, slow, sloshing sounds, like someone wading through shallow water. Then came the tapping again, this time from the window beside the bed. 3 slow taps. We froze. Tyler grabbed his flashlight and pointed it toward the glass. For half a second, we saw her, a pale woman's face just beyond the window, eyes wide and colorless, water dripping from her hair. Then she was gone. The next morning, when daylight came, there were muddy footprints on the porch. They led from the water's edge, straight to the cabin door. We didn't even pack. We just left. They drained part of the lake, but they never found the rest of her. No bones, no remains. Just that hand, and a small piece of torn black fabric clinging to it. Now, every year around the anniversary of her disappearance, locals say the fog around Blackwater Lake gets thicker. Boats stop mid-water for no reason, and if you stand at the edge long enough, sometimes you'll hear a voice whispering your name from below. No one stays there after dark anymore. Not after what they say happened to the two campers last summer, the ones who vanished without a trace. Only their boat was found, drifting in circles, and inside it, a single wet footprint. I've been back only once, years later, just to see it again. The lake looked peaceful, untouched. But when the wind blew, I could swear I heard the faintest sound from across the water, like someone knocking. 3 slow taps. I left before sunset, and I've never gone back. Which story scared you the most? Comment below and subscribe for more true horror stories.